3 minutes. That is exactly how much time Jamie had left before security threw her out onto the rainy streets of Chicago. She wasn't just a waitress who dropped a tray. She was the clumsy disaster everyone at the Gilded Fork loved to hate. But as the manager pointed his finger at the door, Jamie saw something no one else did. Something on the plate of the most dangerous man in the city. If she walked away, he would be dead by dessert. If she spoke up, she'd be ruined. This is the true story of how the girl about to be fired became the only person in the room who could save a life, and the empire that wanted her gone. The date was November 14th, 2019. The location was the Gilded Fork, a restaurant so exclusive that the menu didn't list prices, and the wait list for a table on a Friday night was 6 months long. Jamie Miller stood in the center of the dining room, her face burning with a heat that had nothing to do with the kitchen ovens. At her feet lay the shattered remains of a 1982 Chateau Margaux bottle. The dark red liquid was bleeding into the pristine white carpet, expanding like a gunshot wound. The dining room, usually filled with the low hum of expensive conversation, had gone completely silent. 40 pairs of eyes were fixed on her. I am so sorry," Jamie stammered, dropping to her knees to pick up the shards with her bare hands. She was 24, tired and desperate. Her uniform was slightly too big, hanging off a frame thinned by stress and double shifts. "Stop." The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a paring knife. It was Robert Sterling, the general manager. He was a man who wore Italian suits and smiled only when a customer's credit card cleared. He walked over to Jamie, his polished shoes crunching softly on the glass. He didn't yell. That would have been better. Instead, he leaned down, his voice a harsh whisper right in her ear. "Leave it, Jamie. You'll cut yourself, and I don't want blood on the carpet, too." He straightened up and signaled a busboy with a sharp snap of his fingers. "Go to the back. Get your things. You're done." "Mr. Sterling, please," Jamie pleaded, her voice trembling. It was the tray. The handle was slick. "This is the 3rd incident this month," Sterling said, turning his back on her to apologize to the guests at table 4. "You're a liability. Clock out, now." Jamie felt the tears pricking her eyes, but she swallowed them down. She couldn't cry here. Not in front of the wealthy elite of Chicago. She needed this job. Her younger brother, Toby, was sitting in a hospital bed at St. Judas, and the insurance co-pays were eating her alive. Without this paycheck, she wouldn't make rent, let alone the medical bills. She retreated to the kitchen, passing through the swinging double doors into the chaotic symphony of the back of house. If the dining room was heaven, the kitchen was hell. Steam hissed, pans clanged, and the air was thick with the scent of truffle oil, searing steak, and fear. At the pass, the metal counter separating the cooks from the servers, stood Chef Bastien, a giant of a man with burn scars up his forearms and a temper that was legendary in the culinary world. "Miller!" Bastien barked without looking up from a plate of scallops. "Where is the table 4 wine?" "I dropped it, Chef," Jamie whispered, moving towards the locker room. Bastien froze. The entire kitchen line paused. The sous chefs, the line cooks, even the dishwasher stopped. Bastien looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Get out of my kitchen," he growled, "before I throw you out myself." Jamie rushed to the staff lockers, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't work the combination lock. She finally got it open, grabbing her heavy winter coat. She was fired. It was over. She sat on the small wooden bench, burying her face in her hands, trying to figure out how to tell Toby she'd failed him again. She sat there for 10 minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of the dinner rush. She was just about to stand up and leave when the locker room door banged open. It was Sterling, the manager. He looked flustered, his normally perfect hair slightly askew. He spotted Jamie and stopped. "You're still here," he snapped. "I was just leaving," Jamie said, grabbing her bag. "Wait." Sterling looked at his watch, then back at the door, panic visible in his eyes. "Actually, don't go." "Not yet." Jamie blinked. "What?" "We're short," Sterling hissed, pacing the small room. "Jessica just fainted in the walk-in. Heat exhaustion. The ambulance is on the way. I have a floor with 3 servers down, and he just walked in." "Who?" Jamie asked. "Victor Krov," Sterling said, the name dropping like a lead weight. Jamie froze. Everyone knew the name. Victor Krov was a tech mogul with a reputation for destroying businesses that disappointed him. He was a billionaire, a critic, and a man who supposedly had the palate of a god. A bad review from Krov didn't just hurt ratings. It closed restaurants. "I need bodies on the floor," Sterling said, hating every word. "You stay. You work water and bread. You do not speak. You do not touch the wine. You do not look Mr. Krov in the eye. You just keep the glasses full and stay out of the way until the shift ends. Then you leave forever. Do you understand?" It was a reprieve. One last night. One last tip-out. It was enough to buy Toby's medication for another week. "I understand," Jamie said, buttoning her vest back up. "Good. Fix your face," Sterling said coldly. "You look like a disaster." The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. It was palpable. The air felt tighter, heavier. At the center of the disruption sat Victor Krov. He was sitting at the best table in the house. Table 1, a semi-private alcove with a view of the skyline. He wasn't alone. He was surrounded by an entourage of 4 people. 2 assistants typing furiously on Blackberries, a frantic-looking interpreter, and a bodyguard who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. Jamie moved through the dining room like a ghost, clutching a pitcher of ice water. She was terrified of making a mistake, terrified of Sterling watching her from the shadows. She approached table 1. "Water, sir?" she asked softly. Krov didn't look at her. He was staring at the menu with a look of utter boredom. He waved a hand dismissively. The bodyguard, a man with a thick neck and a scar running through his eyebrow, nodded at her. "Sparkling only for Mr. Krov. Room temperature. No ice," the bodyguard rumbled. "Of course," Jamie said. She retreated to the service station. As she prepared the water, she watched the table. Sterling was personally taking their order. He was sweating. Chef Bastien had actually come out of the kitchen, something he never did, to greet Krov. "Monsieur Krov," Bastien said, bowing slightly. "It is an honor. Tonight, I have prepared the tasting menu, specifically designed for your arrival." Krov looked up, his eyes cold and grey. He said something in Russian. The interpreter jumped in. "Mr. Krov demands perfection. He has heard your saffron risotto is adequate. He will judge for himself. Also," and the interpreter paused, pulling a laminated card from a briefcase, "these are Mr. Krov's dietary restrictions. They are not preferences. They are life and death." Bastien took the card. He nodded solemnly. "Of course, no shellfish, no peanuts, and absolutely no cilantro. We are well aware." "There is one more," the interpreter added nervously. "Mr. Krov has recently developed a sensitivity to capsaicin. Even a mild chili pepper could cause throat closure." Bastien waved his hand arrogantly. "My cuisine is French, strictly classical. We do not rely on cheap heat. You have nothing to fear." Jamie, pouring the water into a crystal glass at the station, felt a strange prickle on the back of her neck. She watched Bastien march back into the kitchen, barking orders. The night wore on. Jamie stuck to her shadows, refilling glasses, clearing bread plates. She was invisible. But being invisible gave her a vantage point no one else had. She saw things. She saw the sous chef, a man named Derek, looking unusually sweaty. Derek was ambitious, slippery, and hated Bastien. He had been passed over for the head chef position 3 times. Jamie had once caught him stealing premium steaks to take home, and he had threatened to get her fired if she spoke. He had been looking for a reason to get rid of her ever since. Tonight, Derek was working the sauce station. The saucier. It was the most critical station on the line. Jamie walked past the pass to drop off dirty dishes. The kitchen was in overdrive. "Order up! Risotto for table 1!" Bastien screamed. Jamie paused. She watched Derek ladle a rich golden sauce over the risotto. It looked perfect. Creamy, vibrant yellow from the saffron, topped with a delicate gold leaf. But as Jamie walked by the pass, a fan blew the steam from the plate toward her. Jamie stopped. She had a secret. It wasn't something she put on a resume, mostly because people thought it was weird. Jamie had hyperosmia, a heightened sense of smell. She could smell rain an hour before it fell. She could tell if a peach was sweet without cutting it open. She could smell the cheap perfume on a man's collar from across the room. It was a curse, usually. The smell of the dumpster behind the restaurant made her gag, and the mix of colognes in the dining room gave her headaches. But right now, as the steam from the risotto hit her nose, she smelled something that didn't belong. Saffron smelled like hay and honey. Butter smelled rich and lactonic. The parmesan smelled nutty. But underneath it all, sharp and metallic, was something else. It was faint, masked by the heavy cream. But it was there. Cayenne. Jamie frowned. Bastien had just promised there was no chili, no capsaicin. She looked at Derek. He was wiping the rim of the sauce pot with a rag, his eyes darting around the kitchen. He looked guilty. "Runner!" Bastien yelled. "Service for table 1." A waiter named Greg grabbed the tray. The risotto, the dish that could kill Victor Krov, was leaving the kitchen. Jamie's heart hammered against her ribs. If she was wrong, and she stopped that plate, she would be fired immediately. Sterling would probably drag her out by her hair. She would never work in this city again. But if she was right... She looked at the plate. She looked at Derek, who was now busying himself with a garnish, refusing to look at the pass. The waiter pushed through the double doors. Jamie didn't think. She didn't weigh the pros and cons. She just moved. She dropped the stack of dirty plates she was holding into the bus tub with a deafening crash and ran after the waiter. She burst into the dining room. Greg was halfway to table 1. Victor Krov was tucking a napkin into his collar, looking expectant. "Wait," Jamie hissed, catching up to Greg. "What are you doing?" Greg whispered furiously, trying to sidestep her. "Get out of the way, Jamie. You're on thin ice. You can't serve that," Jamie said, her voice rising slightly. She could smell it stronger now. It wasn't just cayenne. It was a concentrated chili oil, probably injected into the saffron reduction. "Take it back." "Are you insane?" Greg hissed. "It's the VVIP plate. Move!" "No!" Jamie grabbed the edge of the tray. The dining room went silent again. This was the second scene Jamie had caused in 2 hours. Sterling, who was standing near table 1 pouring wine, looked up. His face went from confusion to pure, unadulterated rage. He marched over, abandoning the wine. "Jamie," Sterling said, his voice trembling with suppressed fury, "let go of the tray. Walk out the front door. Don't even go to the back. Just go." "There's chili in this," Jamie said, her voice shaking, but loud enough for Krov's table to hear. "I can smell it. If he eats this, he'll choke." Sterling looked at the plate. "It's saffron risotto, you idiot. There is no chili in a classic risotto. Chef Bastien made it himself." "Derek made the sauce," Jamie countered. "Please, just check it." Victor Krov turned in his chair. He looked at the commotion, then at his interpreter. The interpreter looked terrified. "What is she saying?" Krov asked in Russian. "She says the food is poisoned," the interpreter translated, his voice high-pitched. Krov stood up. The bodyguard unbuttoned his suit jacket, his hand hovering near his waist. "That is enough." Sterling grabbed Jamie's arm. "You are causing a disturbance. Security." 2 large men in black suits appeared from the entrance. "I'm telling the truth," Jamie yelled, struggling as Sterling pulled her away from the tray. "Don't let him eat it." "Get her out of here," Sterling screamed. As the security guards grabbed Jamie by the elbows, dragging her backward, she saw Greg place the risotto in front of Victor Krov. The steam rose up. Krov picked up his fork. Jamie screamed, "No!" but the heavy oak doors of the restaurant slammed shut in her face. She was out on the street. It was raining. She was fired, humiliated, and she was fairly certain she had just watched a man about to be murdered. The Chicago rain in November was not just wet. It was bone-chillingly aggressive. Jamie stood on the sidewalk, the neon sign of the Gilded Fork buzzing above her head like a dying insect. She was soaked instantly, her thin uniform offering zero protection against the wind coming off the lake. She shivered, hugging her arms to her chest. But she didn't leave. She couldn't. Her mind was racing. Did he eat it? Was I wrong? Maybe it was paprika. Maybe it was just a weird batch of saffron. 1 minute passed. 2. Jamie turned to walk towards the bus stop, her heart heavy with the certainty that she had just hallucinated a smell and ruined her life. She took 3 steps. Then the door behind her flew open. It wasn't a calm exit. It was an explosion of motion. The security guard who had thrown her out, a man named Silas, burst onto the sidewalk. He looked frantic. He scanned the street, his eyes wild until they landed on Jamie. "You!" he roared. Jamie flinched, stepping back. "I'm leaving! I'm going!" Silas didn't listen. He lunged forward, grabbing her arm with a grip that bruised. "Get inside, now!" "What? Why?" Jamie struggled, slipping on the wet pavement. "You fired me!" "He's choking," Silas growled, dragging her back towards the entrance. He took 1 bite, and his throat closed up. "The paramedics are 5 minutes out. You're not going anywhere." Jamie felt a cold pit open in her stomach. She wasn't wrong. Krov had eaten the risotto. Silas dragged her through the heavy oak doors. The scene inside was a nightmare. The elegant hush of the dining room had been replaced by panic. A chair was overturned. At table 1, Victor Krov was on the floor, clutching his throat, his face a terrifying shade of violet. His bodyguard was kneeling over him, jamming an EpiPen into his thigh. Sterling was standing nearby, looking like he was about to vomit. Chef Bastian was shouting at the sous chefs. The guests were standing, whispering, recording on their phones. Silas shoved Jamie towards the group. "I got her, Mr. Sterling." Sterling spun around. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He looked at Jamie not with relief, but with pure, unadulterated accusation. "You," Sterling hissed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You did this." Jamie blinked, water dripping from her hair onto the carpet. "What? No! I tried to stop him." "You knew," Sterling shouted, his voice cracking. "You screamed that it was poisoned before he even touched it. How did you know, Jamie? How did you know there was chili in the risotto unless you put it there?" The room went deadly silent. Even Krov's bodyguard looked up from his gasping boss. Jamie's breath caught in her throat. The logic was twisted, but from their perspective it was perfect. She was the disgruntled employee. She had just been fired. She had caused a scene. And she had predicted the poison. "I smelled it," Jamie cried out, looking around the circle of hostile faces. "I told you, I have a sensitive nose. I smelled the capsaicin in the sauce." "Bullshit." Derek, the sous chef, stepped out from the kitchen line. He was wearing his pristine white chef's coat, looking the picture of professional concern. You can't smell odorless chili extract through a saffron reduction, Jamie. That's impossible, you're lying." "I'm not," Jamie pleaded. She looked at Bastian. "Chef, you know me. I've worked here for 2 years. I would never hurt a guest." Bastian looked at her, his face unreadable. He looked at the gasping billionaire on the floor. He looked at his ruined reputation. He made a calculation. "She was fired for incompetence tonight," Bastian said coldly, his French accent thick with disdain. She was angry. She had access to the pass. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The red and blue lights began to flash against the restaurant's front windows, casting a strobe light effect over the disaster. "Nobody leaves," the bodyguard barked, standing up as Krov's breathing began to stabilize slightly, though his breathing was still ragged and wheezing. "Police are on the way. This is a crime scene. And she," he pointed a massive finger at Jamie, "is the prime suspect." "Done." Jamie felt the walls closing in. She wasn't just fired anymore. She was about to be arrested for attempted murder. The police arrived in force. Within 20 minutes, the Gilded Fork was fully locked down. The guests were ushered out after giving statements, leaving only the staff, the security team, and the unconscious form of Victor Krov, who had been rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in critical condition. The dining room was transformed into a holding tank. The police separated the kitchen staff from the floor staff. Detective James Halloway walked in. He was a man who looked like he'd seen too much of Chicago's dark side. He wore a rumpled trench coat and carried a notepad that looked older than Jamie. He set up a makeshift interrogation space at table 4, the same table where Jamie had dropped the wine bottle just hours ago. Jamie was sitting on a chair in the corner, watched by a uniformed officer. She was still wet, shivering, her hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee a compassionate busboy had sneaked her. "Jamie Miller," Halloway called out. Jamie stood up on shaky legs and walked to the table. Sterling was standing near the bar, watching her with eyes like flint. Derek was leaning against the kitchen door, arms crossed, looking confident. "Sit down," Halloway said. He didn't sound angry, just tired. Jamie sat. "So," Halloway flipped a page in his notebook, "let me get this timeline straight. You were fired at 6:30 p.m. You were asked to stay to help with the rush. At 8:15 p.m., you caused a disturbance, claiming Mr. Krov's food was tainted. You were removed from the premises. Mr. Krov ate the food. He went into anaphylactic shock. Is that correct?" "Yes," Jamie whispered. "The lab boys are running the leftovers now," Halloway said, leaning back. "But the preliminary field test confirms high concentrations of capsaicin oil. Roughly 500,000 Scoville units. That's not an accident. That's a weapon." He leaned forward, staring into Jamie's eyes. "Mr. Sterling tells me you were upset about being fired. He says you threatened that everyone would be sorry." "I never said that," Jamie gasped, looking at Sterling. "I said I was sorry. I begged for my job." "And then," Halloway continued, ignoring her, "sous chef Derek claims he saw you hovering near the sauce station while he was in the walk-in." Jamie whipped her head around to look at Derek. "Liar! I was at the water station. I never went behind the line." Derek shrugged, his face a mask of calm regret. "I wish that were true, Jamie. But I saw you. You were holding a small bottle. I thought it was just hand sanitizer or something. I didn't think you'd actually." He trailed off, shaking his head. "This is crazy," Jamie said, her voice rising. "I smelled it. That's how I knew. I have hyperosmia. Ask anyone. I can smell when the milk is going to expire 2 days before the date. I can smell when the dishwasher is running hot. I smelled the chili in the steam." Halloway sighed. He tapped his pen on the table. "Hyperosmia. That's a convenient superpower, Miss Miller. But here's the problem. We just did a sweep of the locker room." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small, empty glass vial with a black dropper. "We found this in your locker," Halloway said, "in the pocket of your winter coat." Jamie stared at the bag. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. That's not mine." "It has traces of the exact chili oil found in the risotto," Halloway said, "and it was in your coat, the coat you were wearing when you tried to flee the scene." "I didn't try to flee. They threw me out," Jamie cried, tears finally spilling over. "Derek must have put it there. He has the combination to the master lock override. He's the only one who could get into my locker." "Why would the sous chef poison his own VIP dish and frame a waitress?" Halloway asked skeptically. "Because he wants Bastian's job," Jamie said, the pieces clicking together in her mind. "If tonight was a disaster, Bastian would get blamed. Krov ruins restaurants. If Krov dies, or even just gets sick, Bastian is finished. Derek takes over. He's been talking about it for months." "That's a nice story," Halloway said, standing up. "But I have physical evidence linking you to the weapon, and you have the motive of a disgruntled employee." He motioned to the uniformed officer. "Cuff her." "No, please." Jamie stood up, backing away. "You have to listen to me. Smell the vial." Holloway paused. "Excuse me?" "Smell the vial," Jamie shouted. "I'm telling you I can smell things you can't. If Derek touched that vial, his scent is on it. Not just his sweat, but everything he touched today." "This isn't a movie, Jamie," Holloway said, his patience snapping. "We'll run prints, but right now, you're coming with us." The officer grabbed Jamie's wrists. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked shut. It was the sound of her life ending. Toby's medical bills, the rent, her future, all gone. As they marched her towards the door, passing the kitchen staff, Jamie saw Derek. He was watching her, and for a split second, the mask slipped. He smirked, a tiny, imperceptible curl of the lip. Jamie closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to calm her panic. And then she smelled it. As she passed Derek, less than 2 feet away, the scent hit her. It wasn't just the kitchen smells of garlic and onions. Underneath the heavy scent of bleach he had likely just used to wash his hands, there was something else, something specific, something that didn't belong in a kitchen. It was sandalwood and motor oil. Jamie stopped dead, digging her heels into the carpet. The officer stumbled. "Keep moving!" the officer barked. "Wait!" Jamie screamed, turning to Holloway. "Detective!" "Stop!" Holloway stopped near the door. "What now?" "The person who handled that vial," Jamie said, speaking rapidly, her voice trembling but clear. "They smell like sandalwood and motor oil, high-grade synthetic motor oil, and vintage leather." Holloway frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I smell it on Derek," Jamie said, staring straight at the sous chef. "Right now, under the bleach. He scrubbed his hands, but he couldn't get it out of his pores. Does he ride a motorcycle? Does he work on cars?" Derek's face went slightly pale. He took a step back. "She's crazy. I took an Uber to work." "Check his hands," Jamie yelled. "Not for the chili. He washed that off. Check for the oil. And check the vial. I bet you anything that vial smells like motor oil." Holloway looked at Jamie, then at Derek. It was a long shot, a ridiculous, desperate long shot. But Holloway was a good detective because he followed his gut, and his gut was telling him that the waitress was too terrified to be acting, and the sous chef was a little too still. Holloway pulled the evidence bag out of his pocket. He lifted it to his nose. He sniffed. He frowned. He sniffed again. "It smells like—" "Peppermint?" Holloway said. "No," Jamie said. "The peppermint is from the chili extract. It's used to mask the heat smell. Look deeper, behind the sharp smell. It's heavy, oily." Holloway looked at the vial again. He walked over to Derek. "Detective, this is harassment," Sterling interrupted, stepping in. "You have your suspect." "Back off, Sterling," Holloway warned. He stood in front of Derek. "Give me your hands." "I don't have to do that," Derek said, crossing his arms. "You're right," Holloway said. "But if you don't, I'm going to wonder why. And then I'm going to get a warrant for your locker, your car, and your phone records. Or, you show me your hands, and we prove the crazy waitress wrong." Derek hesitated. The silence stretched. The kitchen staff watched, breathless. Slowly, Derek held out his hands. They were pink, scrubbed raw. Holloway leaned in. He sniffed. He pulled back, his eyes narrowing. He looked at Jamie, a strange expression on his face. "I don't smell motor oil," Holloway said. Jamie's heart shattered. She had been so sure. "But," Holloway continued, "I do smell sandalwood, a lot of it, like a distinct, expensive cologne." He turned the evidence bag over. "And I'm getting a faint whiff of it on the plastic baggie this vial was stored in. Not the vial itself, but the bag." Derek yanked his hands back. "I wear cologne. So what? I probably touched the locker handle." "Jamie," Holloway said, turning to her, "you said motor oil." "I did," Jamie insisted. "It's faint, but it's there. Like a vintage car or a mechanic's rag." "I don't own a car," Derek spat. "I told you." "But he does," a voice came from the back of the room. Everyone turned. It was Greg, the waiter who had served the risotto. He looked terrified to be speaking, but he stepped forward. "Derek doesn't drive," Greg said, "but his brother does. His brother owns a chop shop in Southie. Derek was hanging out there all morning before his shift. He told me he was helping his brother fix up a '67 Mustang." Holloway looked at Derek. The sous chef was sweating now, visible beads of perspiration on his forehead. "So," Holloway said, his voice dropping an octave, "you were at a mechanic shop all morning. You got oil on your hands. You washed up, came to work, handled a vial of poison, planted it in Jamie's locker, and then scrubbed your hands with bleach. But you forgot that oil seeps into the cuticles." "This is circumstantial," Derek shouted. "You have nothing." "I have enough to pause this arrest," Holloway said. He signaled the officer. "Uncuff her." "What?" Sterling gasped. "You can't be serious." "And cuff him," Holloway pointed at Derek. "You're making a mistake," Derek screamed as the officer grabbed him. "She's a witch. She's lying." "We'll see," Holloway said. "We're going to swab your hands for hydrocarbon residue. If we find motor oil that matches the residue on the baggie, you're going away for attempted murder." The officer clicked the cuffs onto Derek. Jamie rubbed her wrists, feeling the blood return. She wasn't safe yet. Derek hadn't confessed, but she had bought herself time. Suddenly the front doors opened again. A man in a sleek black suit walked in. He wasn't police. He held a phone to his ear. He walked straight up to Sterling and Holloway. "Who's in charge here?" the man asked. "I am," Holloway said. "Detective Holloway, CPD." "I'm Arthur Penhaligon," the man said. "Personal legal counsel to Victor Krov." The room froze. "Mr. Krov has regained consciousness," Penhaligon said. "He is unable to speak, but he is writing, and he has issued a specific instruction." He looked around the room until his eyes landed on Jamie. "He wants to see the waitress," Penhaligon said. "Me?" Jamie squeaked. "He wants to know," the lawyer said, looking at her with clinical curiosity, "how a waitress knew his food was poisoned when his own security team did not. And he wants to see you now." The ride to Northwestern Memorial Hospital was silent. Jamie sat in the back of a black SUV, flanked by Krov's security detail. She wasn't under arrest, but she certainly wasn't free. They led her up a private elevator to the VIP wing. The hallway was lined with more security. They entered a large suite that looked more like a hotel room than a hospital. Victor Krov was sitting up in bed, hooked up to an IV and a heart monitor. His face was still swollen, his skin pale, but his eyes were alert. Dangerous. He held a tablet in his hand. He couldn't talk. His throat was likely too swollen, so he typed. A mechanical voice spoke from the tablet. "Come closer," the tablet said. Jamie approached the bed. She felt small, dirty in her uniform, smelling of rain and the police station. Krov studied her. He looked at her hands, her face, her eyes. He typed again. "The police say you smelled the poison. Is that true?" "Yes, sir," Jamie said softly. "The police think you are lucky. Or guilty," the tablet voiced. "I do not believe in luck, and my security tells me you tried to stop the plate. A guilty person would have let me eat it and walked away." Krov tapped the screen slowly. "You have a gift?" "It's a condition," Jamie said. "Hyperosmia. Everything smells strong to me. Too strong, usually." Krov's eyes narrowed. He motioned to the side table. There were 3 identical glass domes covering 3 small plates. "Test," the tablet said. "If you are lying, my lawyer will ensure you go to prison for the poison. If you are telling the truth, we will talk." Jamie looked at the domes. "What do I do?" "Tell me what is under them, without lifting the glass." Jamie swallowed. This was it. Her freedom depended on her nose. She stepped to the first dome. She closed her eyes. She inhaled. "Cheese," she said immediately. "A sharp cheddar, aged, maybe 5 years. And a cracker, water cracker, no salt." Krov nodded once. The lawyer lifted the dome, a piece of aged cheddar on a plain cracker. Jamie moved to the second dome. This one was harder. The glass blocked most of the scent. She leaned in, her nose almost touching the cold surface. "Fruit," she said. "Citrus, kumquat?" "No," It's sweeter. A clementine. Peeling is slightly broken." The lawyer lifted the dome. A single peeled clementine. Krov's eyebrows went up. He pointed to the third dome. Jamie moved to it. She inhaled. She frowned. She inhaled again. She looked at Krov. "There's nothing under there," Jamie said. "It's empty, but the plate was recently cleaned with a lemon-scented dish soap, and someone with a latex glove touched the handle." Krov stared at her. For a long moment, the only sound was the beeping of the heart monitor. Then Krov smiled. It was a terrifying expression. The lawyer lifted the third dome. It was empty. Krov typed furiously. "You saved my life," the voice said. "My staff failed. You succeeded. You are fired from the Gilded Fork?" "Yes," Jamie said. "I think so." "Good," Krov typed. "Sterling is a fool. You are wasted there." He paused, looking her up and down. "I have a problem," Krov typed. "A problem that money cannot solve. A problem that security cannot shoot. Someone is sabotaging my company from the inside. I have a mole. I have not been able to find them because they are perfect on paper." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "But people carry their secrets on them," the tablet said. "In their sweat, in their habits, in the places they have been." "And I want to hire you," the voice said. "Not as a waitress, as a consultant. I want you to walk through my headquarters. I want you to sit in my board meetings, and I want you to sniff out the rat." Jamie was stunned. "Mr. Krov, I'm just a server. I don't know anything about corporate espionage." "You know the smell of a lie," Krov typed. "That is all I need. I will pay you $10,000 a week, and I will cover your brother's medical bills, all of them. At St. Jude's." Jamie froze. How do you know about my brother?" "I know everything about the people who saved my life," Krov typed. "Do we have a deal?" Jamie looked at the billionaire. She looked at the lawyer. She thought of Toby, sitting in the hospital, and the stack of final notice bills on her kitchen counter. She thought of Sterling's face when he fired her. "Yes," Jamie said, her voice steady. "We have a deal." "Excellent," Krov typed. "Start tomorrow. But first, you need a shower. You smell like wet dog and cheap coffee." The headquarters of Krov Industries was a monolith of steel and glass piercing the Chicago skyline. It was a fortress of innovation, housing secrets worth billions. To Jamie Miller, it was a sensory nightmare. The air filtration system was too sterile, smelling of ionized dust and ozone. The carpet cleaner used on the 40th floor was lemon-scented but chemically harsh, and the people, dozens of executives in $5,000 suits, smelled of ambition, anxiety, and expensive leather. Jamie stood in the private elevator next to Victor Krov. It had been 3 days since the incident at the Gilded Fork. Krov had been discharged from the hospital, though his voice was still raspy. "You look terrified," Krov said, his voice gravelly. He wasn't using the tablet anymore, though he spoke sparingly. "I'm a waitress," Jamie said, smoothing down the skirt of the new business suit Penhaligon had bought for her. "I know how to balance trays, not uncover corporate spies." "You are a consultant," Krov corrected, "and you are not looking for a spy. You are looking for a leak. A leak has a source. A source has a scent." The elevator doors slid open to the executive floor. It was an open-plan nightmare of polished concrete and minimalist furniture. A dozen people turned to look. They saw their terrifying CEO, and next to him, a young woman who looked like she might bolt at any second. "This is Jamie," Krov announced to the room. "She is my new wellness consultant. She is here to assess the stress levels of the executive team. She has full access. Talk to her." He walked into his office, leaving Jamie standing alone in the shark tank. Arthur Penhaligon, the lawyer, stepped up beside her. He offered a thin, tight smile. "Don't worry, Jamie. Just walk around. Sniff the air. If you catch a whiff of treason, let us know." For the next week, Jamie became a ghost in the machine. She sat in marketing meetings, smelling the stale coffee and the fear of the junior associates. She walked through the server rooms, where the smell of hot silicon and dust was overwhelming. She was looking for something specific. Krov had told her that the leak was related to Project Chimera, a revolutionary quantum battery prototype. The blueprints had been leaked to a competitor in Shanghai mere hours after they were finalized. The leak had to be physical. The servers were air-gapped. Someone had walked out of this building with the data on a drive. On Thursday, Jamie found her first lead. She was sitting in the office of Julian Thorne, the Chief Technology Officer, CTO. Thorne was a brilliant, nervous man who smelled perpetually of peppermint Tums and nervous sweat. "I don't see why you need to be in here," Thorne snapped, typing furiously on his keyboard. "I have work to do." "Mister, Krov just wants to ensure the environment is healthy," Jamie said, sitting on the edge of the sofa. She flared her nostrils slightly. The room smelled of dry erase markers and peppermint. But there was something else, a faint, sweet scent coming from the bottom drawer of his desk, raspberry and burnt foil. Jamie knew that smell. She had smelled it in the alley behind the restaurant where the dishwashers took their breaks. It was synthetic vape juice, specifically a cheap brand. "Do you vape, Mr. Thorne?" Jamie asked. Thorne froze. "Excuse me?" "I smell raspberry vapor juice," Jamie said. "It's against company policy to smoke indoors." Thorne's face turned red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "And," Jamie continued, standing up and walking closer, "I smell it mixed with damp concrete, the kind you find in a parking garage. Specifically, the lowest level of the parking garage. B4. Thorne slammed his laptop shut. "Get out." Jamie left, but she went straight to Krov. "Thorne is hiding something," Jamie told Krov and Penhaligon in the CEO's office. "He's smoking in his office to cover up stress, and he smells like the sub-basement parking level. But executives park on B1. Why is he going to B4? "B4 is storage," Penhaligon said, frowning. "Old files. Maintenance." "He's meeting someone there," Krov said, his eyes darkening. "Security footage? There are no cameras in the blind spots of B4, Penhaligon noted. "That's why the staff go there to smoke." "Tonight," Krov commanded. "We watch him." That evening, the trap was set. Jamie, Krov, and his head of security, a massive man named Silas, the same one who had thrown Jamie out of the restaurant, sat in a blacked-out van in the B4 parking garage. At 7 p.m., the elevator dinged. Julian Thorne walked out. He looked terrified. He was carrying a briefcase. He walked to the far corner, behind a concrete pillar. A moment later, a grey sedan pulled up. The window rolled down. Thorne handed the briefcase through the window. "We got him," Silas growled, reaching for the door handle. "Wait," Jamie whispered. She pressed her face against the cold glass of the van window. The ventilation system of the garage was pushing air towards them. "What is it?" Krov asked. "The car," Jamie said, her eyes widening. "I can smell the exhaust. It's running rich, but inside. The driver. What about the driver?" "The driver smells like the gilded fork," Jamie whispered. Krov froze. "What?" "Not the food," Jamie said, her mind racing, connecting the olfactory dots. "The cleaning supplies, the industrial lemon polish they use on the floors, and clarified butter." "A chef?" Penhaligon asked from the front seat. "No," Jamie said. "Derek the sous chef is in jail. This smells like the manager's office. It smells like Robert Sterling." Krov didn't hesitate. "Take them down." Silas and 2 other guards burst from the van. The grey sedan screeched, trying to peel out, but the security team shot out the tires. The car slammed into a pillar. They dragged the driver out. It was indeed Robert Sterling, the disgraced manager of the Gilded Fork. Thorne was on his knees, sobbing. "I didn't want to. He blackmailed me. He said he had photos of me." Jamie stepped out of the van. The air was thick with the smell of burnt rubber and gunpowder. She walked up to Sterling, who was pinned to the ground by Silas. Sterling looked up at her, hate in his eyes. "You," he spat, "the waitress." "Why?" Jamie asked. "Why poison Krov? Why steal the data?" "Because he ruined me," Sterling screamed. 10 years ago, Krov bought the building my father's restaurant was in. He evicted us to build a server farm. My father killed himself. I wanted to take everything from him. His life, his company, his legacy. Krov stood over Sterling, looking unimpressed. I don't even remember your father, he said coldly. Take him away. It seemed like a victory. Thorne was arrested. Sterling was arrested. The leak was plugged. The assassination attempt was solved. Jamie felt a wave of relief. She had done it. She had proven herself. But as the police cars arrived to take Sterling away, Jamie walked past the open trunk of Sterling's grey sedan. The trunk had popped open in the crash. Inside was a duffel bag. It was open. Inside were stacks of cash and a burner phone. Jamie stopped. The wind shifted. She smelled the cash. It smelled of ink and cotton. She smelled the car, old French fries and stale smoke, but she smelled something else coming from the bag, a scent that made the hair on her arms stand up, sandalwood, an expensive paper, and a specific type of mint. It was the same scent she had smelled on the evidence bag in the police station, the scent Detective Halloway had thought was cologne. Jamie turned slowly. She looked at Arthur Penhaligon. The lawyer was standing next to Krov, looking satisfied, typing on his phone. The wind blew from Penhaligon toward Jamie. She smelled his cologne, sandalwood. She smelled his breath. Mint. And she realized with a jolt of horror that Sterling's car smelled exactly like Arthur Penhaligon's office. Sterling wasn't the mastermind. Sterling was the middleman. Sterling was the one handling the dirty work, but he wasn't the one who could get close enough to Krov to know his schedule, his allergies, and the secrets of Project Chimera. Sterling was a restaurant manager. He didn't know how to sell quantum battery schematics to the Chinese, but a corporate lawyer did. Jamie's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Krov, who was turning his back to Penhaligon to walk towards the elevator. Krov was alone with the real monster. Jamie didn't scream. If she screamed, Penhaligon would know she knew. He was a smart man. He likely had a contingency plan. She needed to get Krov away from him. "Mr. Krov!" Jamie called out, her voice pitching up just slightly. "Wait, I think I dropped my inhaler in the van." Krov stopped and turned. "We will send someone for it later, Jamie. It's been a long night." "Please," Jamie said, walking quickly towards them. She needed to get between them. "I need it now. The stress. I can't breathe." She grabbed Krov's arm. It was a breach of protocol, but she didn't care. She pulled him slightly away from Penhaligon. "What is wrong with you?" Krov hissed, looking down at her. Jamie leaned in, standing on her tiptoes, and whispered 4 words into his ear. "He smells like the money." Krov pulled back, looking at her face. He saw the terror in her eyes. He was a man who survived by reading people, and he read the absolute certainty in Jamie's expression. Krov didn't look at Penhaligon. He didn't flinch. He simply turned to Silas, his head of security. "Silas," Krov said calmly, "review the trunk of the car. Jamie thinks there is something we missed." Penhaligon stiffened. "Sir, the police are handling it. We should go upstairs. The press will be here soon." "In a moment, Arthur," Krov said. His posture had changed. He was no longer the tired victim. He was the predator. Penhaligon's hand went into his jacket pocket. Jamie smelled it instantly. A sharp, metallic, tangy scent. Gun oil. "He has a gun!" Jamie screamed, shoving Krov backward. Penhaligon drew a sleek, suppressed pistol from his coat. The motion was fluid, practiced. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a cleaner. "Smart girl," Penhaligon sneered, leveling the gun at Krov. "Too smart for a waitress." Silas and the guards were too far away, inspecting the trunk. Krov was on the ground where Jamie had shoved him. Jamie was the only thing standing between the muzzle and the billionaire. "Why, Arthur?" Krov asked from the ground, his voice calm but icy. "You have been with me for 20 years. And for 20 years, I've cleaned up your messes," Penhaligon said, his hand steady. "I've buried your scandals. I've fought your lawsuits. And you pay me a salary while you make billions. I wanted my share, Victor. Project Chimera was my exit package. Sterling was just a useful idiot with a grudge to distract you while I moved the data. You poisoned me, Krov said. I needed you incapacitated, Penhaligon shrugged. If you died, fine. If you were in a coma, better. I would have power of attorney. But this little rat, he pointed the gun at Jamie, sniffed it out, literally. Move, Jamie, Penhaligon commanded. I'm going to put a bullet in his head, and then I'm going to leave. If you move, you live. Jamie looked at the gun. She looked at Penhaligon. She could smell the adrenaline pouring off him. It smelled sour, like vinegar. She looked at the environment. They were in a concrete garage. The ventilation fans were roaring above them. Jamie's nose picked up something else. A scent she had ignored earlier because of the car fumes. Propane. Behind Penhaligon, against the wall, was a cage of propane tanks for the floor buffers. One of the stray bullets from the earlier shootout with Sterling's car must have nicked a valve. It was a faint hiss, a faint smell, but to Jamie, it was screaming. Penhaligon was standing 5 feet from an invisible cloud of explosive gas. Jamie looked at Penhaligon. You can't shoot him. Watch me. Penhaligon tightened his finger on the trigger. No, Jamie said, raising her hands. I mean, you literally can't. Do you smell that? Penhaligon frowned. Smell what? Another ghost, Jamie? Rotten eggs, Jamie lied. Propane was odorless, but they added mercaptan to it so people could smell leaks. But the leak was fresh, and the ventilation was pulling it away from Penhaligon, swirling it behind him. It's a gas leak. If you fire that gun, the muzzle flash will ignite the air behind you. Penhaligon hesitated. The confidence flickered. He sniffed the air. He couldn't smell it. You're lying, he snarled. Am I? Jamie asked, her voice trembling. I smelled the chili in the risotto. I smelled the vape juice on Thorn. I smelled the money in the trunk. Do you really want to bet your life that I'm wrong? It was a bluff, a partial one. The gas was there, but would it explode? Jamie didn't know physics, she only knew smells. But she knew fear, and she could smell the doubt creeping into Penhaligon's pores. For 1 second, Penhaligon took his eyes off Krov to glance at the propane cage behind him. That was all Silas needed. The head of security didn't yell. He threw a tire iron, which he had been using to pry open the trunk, with the force of a cannonball. The iron struck Penhaligon's wrist with a sickening crack. The gun clattered to the floor. Silas tackled Penhaligon before the lawyer could scream. Krov stood up, brushing the dust off his suit. He walked over to where Penhaligon was pinned, groaning in pain. Krov picked up the gun. He ejected the magazine and tossed it aside. He looked at Jamie. She was shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. Was there really a gas leak? Krov asked quietly. Jamie took a deep breath. She smelled the propane again. Yes, but probably not enough to explode. The ventilation is too strong. Krov looked at the propane cage, then back at her. A rare, genuine smile touched his lips. You are a terrible liar, Jamie, Krov said, but a magnificent bluffer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, handing it to her. Wipe your face, he said. We have a board meeting in the morning, and you are going to need a raise. 6 months later. Jamie Miller walked into the Gilded Fork. She wasn't wearing an oversized apron. She was wearing a tailored cream blazer and heels. The restaurant was under new management. Bastian was still the head chef. He had been cleared of any involvement. But the atmosphere was different. Lighter. The hostess, a new girl who looked as terrified as Jamie once had, hurried over. Do you have a reservation, ma'am? I'm meeting someone, Jamie said. She walked to table 1. Victor Krov was waiting. He stood up when she approached. Jamie, you're late. I was working, Jamie said, sitting down. The merger with the Japanese tech firm. Their CEO smelled like he was hiding a heart condition. I advised the board to add a health clause to the contract. Saved us $10 million in insurance premiums. Good, Krov said, pouring her a glass of water. Sparkling, no ice. And your brother? Jamie smiled. The tightness that had defined her face for years was gone. Toby is out of the hospital. Remission. He's starting college in the fall. Graphic design. Excellent, Krov said. A waiter approached. It was Greg, the one who had almost served the poison. He looked at Jamie, his eyes widening. He placed a plate of saffron risotto on the table. Compliments of Chef Bastian, Greg stammered. He checked it himself. Jamie looked at the risotto. It was golden. Perfect. She leaned over the plate. She closed her eyes and inhaled. Saffron, butter, parmesan, white wine. And she opened her eyes and smiled at Greg. Truffle, she said. White Alba truffle. He's trying to suck up to me. Is it working? Krov asked, picking up his fork. Jamie picked up her own fork. Absolutely. She took a bite. It tasted like victory. Jamie Miller had been fired for dropping a tray. She had been humiliated, accused, and threatened. But she had learned something valuable in the fires of the Gilded Fork and the boardrooms of Krov Industries. The world is full of secrets. People lie. Smiles lie. Even eyes can lie. But the scent never lies. You just have to know how to breathe it in. And that is how Jamie Miller went from a fired waitress to the highest-paid corporate consultant in Chicago. She proved that sometimes your weirdest quirk is actually your greatest superpower. Victor Krov learned that loyalty isn't found in a resume, but in the people willing to speak the truth when everyone else stays silent. Jamie never went back to waiting tables, but she still tips 50%, because she knows exactly what it smells like in the back of the house. If you enjoyed this story of suspense, betrayal, and sweet justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more true-to-life drama stories like Jamie's, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. What's the weirdest superpower you have? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.